Maya Ellison had been hired to design and manage the elaborate floral arrangements for the Costa family's annual charity gala, an event known throughout the city for its elegance and the notable presence of some of the most powerful and feared figures within the criminal underworld. She had spent the entire afternoon carefully arranging towering centerpieces and delicate floral displays throughout the grand ballroom, taking quiet pride in transforming the elegant space into something truly beautiful. As the evening progressed and formally dressed guests began filling the ballroom, Maya remained quietly near the edges of the event, discreetly monitoring her floral arrangements and making small adjustments whenever necessary. She had grown accustomed to working within such elegant, intimidating settings, though she always maintained a professional distance from the actual social proceedings occurring around her. It was during one of her careful rounds through the ballroom that she first noticed him, a tall, quiet young man standing alone near a distant corner, his posture stiff and uncomfortable amid the confident, elegant socializing occurring throughout the rest of the room. Unlike the other guests, who moved confidently between conversations and laughter, this young man remained isolated, his gaze fixed nervously on the floor, clearly uncomfortable within the crowded, formal setting. Maya recognized him vaguely from earlier introductions as Julian Costa, the notably reserved younger brother of Adrian Costa, the powerful and widely respected head of the Costa family. She had heard quiet whispers among the household staff regarding Julian's unusual shyness, a stark contrast to his older brother's confident, commanding presence throughout their family's influential business dealings. Watching him standing alone, visibly uncomfortable as the evening's music began playing and other guests moved gracefully toward the dance floor, Maya felt an unexpected wave of genuine sympathy. She understood clearly what it felt like to stand awkwardly at the edges of elegant, intimidating social settings, having experienced her own share of insecurity throughout her life, particularly regarding her curvy figure within an industry often dominated by rigid standards of conventional beauty. Without overthinking her decision, Maya set aside the small floral arrangement she had been adjusting and walked purposefully toward Julian, offering him a warm, genuine smile as she approached. "Would you like to dance?" she asked simply, her tone gentle and entirely free of pity or condescension. Julian's eyes widened with clear surprise, his expression shifting rapidly through disbelief, nervousness, and cautious hope. I'm not very good," he admitted quietly, a slight stutter evident in his hesitant words, clear embarrassment coloring his expression. Maya's smile remained warm and reassuring. "Neither am I, honestly," she said cheerfully, extending her hand invitingly. "We can be terrible together." Julian studied her carefully, clearly searching for any sign of mockery or insincerity, finding instead genuine warmth and patience in her steady, kind gaze. Slowly, hesitantly, he accepted her extended hand, allowing her to gently guide him toward the edge of the dance floor. Across the room, Adrian Costa stood engaged in a serious business conversation with several important guests, though his attention remained divided, his sharp eyes occasionally scanning the room out of habitual vigilance. It was during one such scan that he noticed his younger brother, uncharacteristically standing near the dance floor, hesitantly moving alongside an unfamiliar young woman with warm, kind eyes and a genuine, encouraging smile. Adrian's conversation faded instantly into background noise as he watched, stunned and genuinely moved, as Julian, his shy, deeply anxious younger brother who typically avoided any form of social attention entirely, slowly began to relax, his usually stiff posture softening slightly as Maya patiently guided him through simple, forgiving dance steps, her laughter genuine and encouraging rather than mocking or impatient. Adrian had spent years worrying deeply about Julian's social isolation, understanding clearly the painful history behind his brother's anxiety, yet feeling largely powerless to help him overcome such deeply rooted fears. Watching this unexpected, genuine kindness unfold before him, entirely unprompted and without any apparent ulterior motive, Adrian found himself unable to look away, admiration and curiosity building steadily within him regarding the identity of this remarkable young woman. "Who exactly is that, dancing with Julian?" Adrian asked quietly, interrupting his own conversation, his gaze remaining fixed intently on the unexpected, heartwarming scene unfolding across the room. One of his associates, following his gaze curiously, offered a brief explanation. "That's Maya Ellison, the florist responsible for tonight's arrangements," he replied, mild surprise evident in his own tone at witnessing such an unusual interaction. Adrian nodded slowly, his attention remaining fully captured by Maya's genuine patience and warmth toward his brother. He watched as Julian, though still visibly nervous, began smiling shyly, genuine enjoyment evident clearly in his relaxed, cautious movements as the dance continued. For the remainder of the evening, despite numerous important conversations and obligations requiring his attention, Adrian found his gaze repeatedly drawn back toward Maya, genuine admiration and curiosity steadily deepening within him regarding this unexpected, remarkable woman who had so effortlessly and genuinely brought comfort and confidence to his deeply anxious younger brother. As the evening eventually concluded and guests began departing, Adrian remained thoughtfully near the ballroom's entrance, watching quietly as Maya gathered her belongings, entirely unaware of the profound impression her simple, genuine kindness had already made upon the powerful, notoriously guarded man observing her from across the room. Within 2 days, Dante returned to Alessio's office with a thorough report regarding Grace Bellamy's background. She works as an elementary school teacher, Dante explained, reviewing his notes carefully. No significant family wealth, no connections to any business circles that overlap with ours. She attended the gala simply as a +1 for a childhood friend. Alessio listened carefully, his naturally cautious mind still searching for any hidden motive behind Grace's unexpected kindness toward his brother. "Are you certain there's no calculated angle here?" he asked directly. "People rarely approach Matteo without some ulterior interest, given our family's position." Dante shook his head firmly. "I've looked thoroughly, boss. She seems to be exactly who she appears to be, genuinely kind, without any apparent awareness of the potential advantages her connection to your family might offer." Alessio considered this information seriously, his protective instincts warring against his growing curiosity regarding this unusual young woman who had so easily brought genuine joy into his brother's typically guarded world. Despite Dante's reassurance, Alessio decided he needed to observe Grace more directly himself before fully trusting her intentions. He arranged, through a mutual acquaintance, an opportunity to encounter Grace personally at a smaller, more casual community event the following week, wanting to understand her character firsthand rather than relying entirely on second-hand reports. When he approached her directly, introducing himself formally, Grace's reaction surprised him considerably. "Mr. Conti," she said politely, though her tone carried none of the nervous deference he typically encountered from those aware of his reputation. "Matteo mentioned you might stop by eventually. He speaks of you often, and with a lot of admiration." Alessio studied her closely, genuine surprise evident in his controlled expression. "You've spoken with my brother since the gala, then?" he asked carefully. Grace nodded, warmth evident clearly in her expression. "We've had coffee a few times," she admitted honestly. "He's wonderful company, once he feels comfortable enough to open up." Alessio considered her words carefully, still cautious despite her evident sincerity. "My brother has always been somewhat protected from certain aspects of our world," he said directly, testing her reaction. "I hope you understand the complications that might arise from a connection with him." Grace met his gaze steadily, entirely unintimidated by his measured, testing tone. "I'm not interested in your world's complications, Mr. Conti," she said honestly. "I'm interested in Matteo. He's thoughtful, genuinely funny once he relaxes, and remarkably kind. Those are the things that matter to me." Alessio studied her closely, genuine respect beginning to replace his earlier suspicion. "Most people are quick to see only his reserved nature, or worse, my family's reputation," he admitted, a rare note of vulnerability entering his tone. "You seem to see him clearly, beyond either of those things." Grace smiled gently. "He deserves to be seen clearly," she said simply. "Everyone does." Alessio found himself unexpectedly moved by her straightforward sincerity, understanding gradually that his initial suspicion had been misplaced. "Thank you for your honesty," he said sincerely. "And for the genuine kindness you've shown my brother." Grace studied him thoughtfully. "You worry about him a great deal," she observed gently, no judgment evident in her tone. Alessio nodded, his usual guarded composure softening slightly. "He's had a difficult path," he admitted honestly, though he stopped short of sharing further details. "I've always felt responsible for protecting him." Grace considered his words carefully, warmth and understanding evident clearly in her expression. "Protection matters," she said gently, "but so does trusting him to find his own happiness, even if that means allowing him some independence from that protection." Alessio studied her closely, her words settling deeply within him, challenging assumptions he had held tightly for years regarding his role in Matteo's life. "That's a fair point," he admitted quietly, genuine consideration evident clearly in his thoughtful expression. As their conversation concluded, Alessio found himself walking away with far more respect for Grace than he had anticipated feeling, his earlier suspicion gradually transforming into cautious optimism regarding what her genuine presence might mean for his brother's continued happiness and growth. Neither Alessio nor Grace yet realized clearly, however, that this growing trust would soon be tested by forces neither anticipated, as certain rivals began noticing Matteo's unusual, genuine happiness as a potential vulnerability worth exploiting. When Matteo was only 9 years old, he had contracted a severe illness that kept him confined to bed for nearly a year, his weakened immune system leaving him vulnerable to complication after complication during a prolonged, frightening recovery. Alessio, 5 years older, had spent countless hours by his younger brother's bedside during that difficult year, reading to him, keeping him company, and doing everything within his power to ease Matteo's isolation during such a formative, lonely period. The illness itself eventually passed, though its lasting effects extended well beyond Matteo's physical recovery. Having missed an entire year of school and normal childhood socialization during such a critical developmental period, Matteo returned to his peers noticeably behind in social confidence, struggling considerably to reconnect with old friendships and build new ones. Children could be unkind, and Matteo, already naturally quiet and introspective, found himself increasingly withdrawn, uncomfortable navigating social situations that came naturally to his peers. Alessio, watching his younger brother struggle painfully to find his place, had taken it upon himself to become Matteo's fiercest protector, stepping in whenever he witnessed other children mocking his brother's quiet nature or awkward social attempts. As their family's position within the criminal underworld grew increasingly prominent during their teenage years, Alessio worked doubly hard to shield Matteo from the harsher expectations and dangers that came with their family's reputation, understanding clearly that his brother's gentle, sensitive nature simply wasn't suited to the calculated ruthlessness often required within their world. By the time Alessio formally took over as Don following their father's retirement, he had structured their organization carefully to keep Matteo largely insulated from the most dangerous and demanding aspects of their business, instead allowing him to focus on quieter, administrative responsibilities that played to his careful, detail-oriented strengths rather than forcing him into situations requiring the social confidence and ruthless negotiation their world often demanded. This careful protection, while well-intentioned, had also inadvertently limited Matteo's opportunities to build genuine social connections and romantic relationships, most potential acquaintances either intimidated by their family's reputation or specifically warned away by Alessio's protective vigilance. Matteo had grown into adulthood capable and intelligent, yet still carrying the social hesitancy shaped by his difficult childhood illness and isolation. Now, watching his brother's genuine happiness blossoming through his growing connection with Grace, Alessio found himself confronting the complicated reality that his years of protective instinct, while born from genuine love, had perhaps also unintentionally limited Matteo's opportunities for authentic connection and independence. One evening, Alessio found Matteo working quietly in his office, reviewing routine administrative documents as he always did. "You've seemed different lately," Alessio observed carefully, taking a seat across from his brother. "Happier." Matteo looked up, a small, genuine smile forming on his face, something Alessio had rarely witnessed so easily during recent years. "Grace has that effect," he admitted honestly. "She doesn't make me feel like I need to be anyone other than who I already am." Alessio studied him closely, warmth and quiet emotion evident clearly in his own expression. "I'm glad," he said sincerely. "You deserve that kind of genuine acceptance." Matteo studied his older brother carefully, curiosity evident in his gentle expression. "You've always worked so hard to protect me," he said thoughtfully. "I've always appreciated that, even when I didn't fully understand it." Alessio nodded, complicated emotion evident clearly beneath his usually composed exterior. "I only ever wanted you to be safe and happy," he admitted honestly. "Sometimes, I worry I focused too much on the safety, and not enough on ensuring you had genuine opportunities for happiness." Matteo considered his brother's words carefully, gratitude and understanding evident clearly in his own gentle expression. "You've given me exactly what I needed, when I needed it most," he said sincerely. "Now, perhaps, it's simply time to trust that I can find some of my own happiness as well." Alessio studied his brother closely, pride and quiet emotion evident clearly in his own expression. "You're right," he said softly, genuine acceptance evident clearly in his tone. "I'll try to trust that more." As their conversation concluded warmly, both brothers understood clearly that their relationship, built through years of protective care and genuine love, was gradually evolving into something new, one that allowed Matteo the space to build his own independent happiness while still maintaining the deep, genuine bond they had always shared. Neither of them yet realized clearly, however, that this newfound happiness would soon face a serious, calculated threat from those seeking to exploit Mateo's genuine vulnerability for their own dangerous purposes. Over the following weeks, Mateo and Grace's gentle friendship continued deepening naturally, their regular coffee meetings gradually evolving into longer walks through the city's quiet parks and thoughtful conversations that stretched comfortably into the evenings. Mateo found himself opening up more freely with each meeting, Grace's patient, genuine warmth helping him feel increasingly comfortable sharing pieces of himself he rarely revealed to others. "I used to think something was wrong with me," Mateo admitted one afternoon, as they sat together on a park bench watching children play nearby. "Growing up, everyone else seemed to navigate social situations so easily, and I always felt like I was constantly a step behind." Grace studied him gently, warmth and understanding evident clearly in her expression. "There's nothing wrong with being quiet or thoughtful," she said sincerely. "The world needs people who listen carefully and think before they speak, just as much as it needs people who fill every silence." Mateo felt himself relax further at her genuine reassurance. "You make it feel simple," he said honestly, "something that's always felt complicated for me." Grace smiled warmly. "Maybe it is simple," she said gently. "Maybe it's just about finding the people who appreciate you exactly as you are." Their bond continued growing steadily, Mateo finding himself genuinely happier and more confident with each passing week. Alessio, observing this transformation from a respectful distance, found himself gradually easing his usual protective vigilance, choosing instead to trust the genuine happiness clearly blossoming within his brother. One evening, Alessio invited Grace to a quiet, informal family dinner, wanting to properly welcome her into their world without the pressure and formality of their earlier gala encounter. "Thank you for everything you've brought into Mateo's life," Alessio said sincerely during a quiet moment together in the kitchen, while Mateo set the table nearby. Grace smiled warmly, appreciation evident clearly in her expression. "He's brought just as much into mine," she said honestly. "I've genuinely enjoyed getting to know him, and you as well, Alessio." Alessio studied her closely, genuine respect and gratitude evident clearly in his own expression. "I'll admit, I was cautious initially," he said honestly. "But I can see clearly now how genuine your connection with Mateo truly is." Grace nodded, understanding evident clearly in her gentle expression. "I understand your caution," she said sincerely. "You've clearly worked hard to protect him. That kind of love is admirable, even when it comes with understandable hesitation." As their dinner continued warmly that evening, Alessio found himself genuinely grateful for Grace's presence within their lives, appreciating deeply the natural, easy happiness she had brought into his brother's previously guarded, careful existence. He found himself gradually releasing some of his own protective instincts, trusting increasingly in Mateo's capability to navigate his own happiness and relationships. However, unbeknownst to any of them, a calculating rival named Victor Salazar had taken careful notice of Mateo's growing happiness and increased visibility within their social circles. Recognizing this newfound connection as a potential vulnerability, Victor began quietly considering how he might exploit Mateo's genuine happiness to gain leverage against Alessio's otherwise carefully guarded organization. "The quiet brother has found himself a girlfriend," Victor mentioned coldly during a private meeting with his associates. "If Alessio genuinely cares about protecting his brother's happiness, that connection becomes exactly the kind of leverage we've been searching for." His associates exchanged calculating glances, recognizing clearly the potential opportunity within Victor's observation. "How do you intend to proceed?" one asked carefully. Victor considered his options seriously. "We approach the girl directly," he said firmly. "Convince her she's being used, manipulated for the family's business interests. If we can create enough doubt and confusion, we might successfully destroy this connection entirely, weakening Alessio's careful control over his brother's happiness and, by extension, his own emotional stability." As Victor's calculated scheme began quietly forming, neither Mateo, Grace, nor Alessio yet realized clearly just how soon this genuine, hard-won happiness would face a serious, deliberate threat, one designed specifically to exploit the very trust and vulnerability that had made their connection so genuinely meaningful in the first place. Victor Salazar moved carefully, arranging for one of his associates to approach Grace privately, posing as a concerned acquaintance with insider knowledge of the Conti family's business dealings. The associate, a smooth-talking man named Franco, approached Grace outside the school where she taught, his tone carefully calculated to sound genuinely concerned rather than manipulative. "I don't mean to alarm you," Franco began carefully, But I felt it was important someone warned you honestly about the Conti family's true intentions. Grace studied him cautiously, uncertain of this stranger's sudden, unsolicited approach. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said carefully, her guard immediately rising. Franco continued smoothly, his fabricated concern carefully calculated to plant seeds of doubt. "Matteo's connection to you isn't simply personal," he said carefully. "The family has been using his relationships before to gather information, to appear more approachable to outsiders who might otherwise be cautious of their business dealings. I worry you might unknowingly be caught in something considerably more complicated than genuine affection." Grace felt unease growing within her despite her instinctive skepticism toward this stranger's claims. "Why would you tell me this?" she asked directly, studying him carefully. Franco offered a practiced, sympathetic expression. "I've seen good people hurt by that family's calculated manipulation before," he said smoothly. "I simply believe you deserve to know the truth before you become further entangled." Though Grace remained instinctively cautious of Franco's claims, his carefully planted doubt lingered uncomfortably within her thoughts over the following days. She found herself unable to fully dismiss his warning, uncertainty gradually creeping into her previously confident, genuine connection with Matteo. Matteo, noticing Grace's sudden, uncharacteristic distance and hesitation during their following meetings, grew increasingly concerned. "Is everything all right?" he asked gently, sensing clearly something had shifted within her demeanor. Grace hesitated, torn between her genuine trust in Matteo and the unsettling doubt Franco's manipulation had planted within her mind. "I need to ask you something directly," she said carefully. "Has your family ever used your relationships for business purposes, without your full awareness?" Matteo's expression shifted with genuine confusion and hurt. "Where is this coming from, Grace?" he asked, clear concern evident in his gentle voice. Grace explained honestly about Franco's unexpected approach and unsettling claims, watching carefully as Matteo's confusion quickly shifted toward serious concern. "Grace, I promise you, nothing about our connection has ever been calculated or used for business purposes," he said sincerely, though clear hurt was evident in his voice at her understandable uncertainty. "Someone is clearly trying to manipulate you." Recognizing quickly the seriousness of the situation, Matteo immediately informed Alessio of Franco's manipulative approach toward Grace. Alessio's expression hardened instantly upon hearing the details. "This is clearly Victor Salazar's doing," he said firmly, anger evident clearly beneath his controlled exterior. "He's attempting to exploit Grace's uncertainty to destroy your happiness and weaken our family stability." Alessio quickly arranged a private meeting with Grace directly, wanting to personally address her understandable concerns with complete honesty and transparency. "I understand someone approached you with troubling claims," he said gently, genuine concern evident clearly in his tone. "I want you to know clearly, Matteo's connection to you has never been about business or calculated manipulation." Grace studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deception, finding instead genuine sincerity and concern. "Then why would someone approach me with such specific, calculated claims?" she asked directly. Alessio considered his response carefully before explaining honestly. "We have a rival, Victor Salazar, who has clearly recognized Matteo's happiness as a potential vulnerability," he said seriously. "He's attempting to manipulate you into doubting your own genuine connection, hoping to destroy something meaningful simply to weaken our family." Grace absorbed this information carefully, relief and clarity gradually replacing her earlier uncertainty. "I'm sorry for doubting Matteo," she said sincerely, genuine regret evident clearly in her tone. "I should have trusted my own instincts rather than a stranger's manipulative claims." Alessio offered a reassuring smile. "Your caution was completely understandable, given the situation," he reassured her gently. "I'm simply grateful the truth became clear before any lasting damage was done." With the manipulation fully exposed and Grace's trust in Matteo genuinely restored, Alessio moved quickly and decisively to address Victor Salazar's calculated interference directly, ensuring clearly that any further attempts to exploit his brother's happiness would face serious, immediate consequences. As Grace and Matteo reunited that evening, genuine relief and renewed trust evident clearly between them, both understood deeply that their bond had emerged even stronger through this challenging, revealing ordeal, setting the stage for their genuine connection to fully blossom, free from external manipulation or doubt. With Victor Salazar's manipulative scheme fully exposed, Alessio moved swiftly to ensure the matter would never again threaten his brother's hard-won happiness. He gathered clear evidence of Victor's involvement in the calculated attempt to manipulate Grace, evidence that included Franco's own testimony once confronted directly with the seriousness of his actions and the consequences awaiting anyone who continued protecting Victor's reckless scheme. Rather than escalating the situation into open, violent conflict, Alessio chose a more calculated, strategic response, understanding clearly that his brother's happiness mattered more than any dramatic show of force. He quietly shared the evidence of Victor's manipulation with several other influential families within their circle, families who valued honor and legitimate boundaries even within their complicated world, ensuring Victor's reputation suffered significant, lasting damage among his own allies and associates. Within weeks, Victor found himself increasingly isolated, his standing among other powerful families severely diminished by the revelation of his willingness to manipulate an innocent civilian for calculated business advantage. Recognizing the complete collapse of his own influence and unwilling to risk further consequences, Victor quietly withdrew any further interference in Alessio's affairs, understanding clearly that continuing his reckless scheme would only invite further, more serious retaliation. With the threat fully neutralized, Alessio finally allowed himself to focus completely on witnessing his brother's genuine happiness continue to flourish, free from any external threat or manipulation. He found himself reflecting often on Grace's earlier words regarding trust and independence, understanding more clearly with each passing day the wisdom behind allowing Matteo the space to build his own genuine connections and happiness. One evening, several weeks after Victor's scheme had been fully resolved, Alessio invited Matteo to join him for a quiet dinner, wanting to properly acknowledge the remarkable transformation he had witnessed within his brother over recent months. "You seem like an entirely different person than you were just a few months ago," Alessio observed warmly, genuine pride evident clearly in his expression. Matteo smiled, genuine happiness evident clearly in his relaxed, confident demeanor. "I feel like a different person," he admitted honestly. "Grace has helped me see myself differently, beyond simply the quiet, anxious younger brother I've always assumed myself to be." Alessio studied him closely, warmth and admiration evident clearly in his own expression. "You've always been more than that, Matteo," he said sincerely. "I think perhaps I simply didn't trust the world enough to let you discover that for yourself." Matteo considered his brother's words carefully, gratitude and understanding evident clearly in his gentle expression. "You protected me because you loved me," he said softly. "I've never doubted that, even when your protection felt overwhelming at times." Alessio nodded, complicated emotion evident clearly beneath his usually composed exterior. "I think I've learned an important lesson through watching your happiness with Grace," he admitted honestly. "Real protection isn't about shielding someone from every possible risk. Sometimes, it's about trusting them enough to let them take those risks themselves, while still standing ready to support them if things go wrong." Matteo smiled warmly, genuine appreciation evident clearly in his expression. "Thank you for learning that," he said sincerely, "and for trusting me enough to let this happen." Their conversation was interrupted gently as Grace arrived, having been invited to join them for dessert following their private dinner. She greeted both brothers warmly, genuine happiness evident clearly in her expression as she settled comfortably beside Matteo. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important," she said warmly, glancing between the two brothers. Alessio smiled genuinely, warmth evident clearly in his expression. "Not at all," he said sincerely. "We were simply discussing how much has changed for the better these past few months." Grace studied Matteo affectionately, genuine warmth evident clearly in her own expression. "I'd say that's true for both of us," she said softly, gently taking Matteo's hand. Alessio watched this simple, genuine exchange with quiet satisfaction, understanding clearly the depth of authentic happiness his brother had found through Grace's genuine, unwavering acceptance and support. "I want you both to know," he said sincerely, "that you have my complete blessing and support, moving forward." Matteo felt genuine emotion swell within him at his brother's heartfelt words. "That means more than you probably realize," he said softly, gratitude evident clearly in his voice. Grace smiled warmly, appreciation evident clearly in her own expression. "Thank you, Alessio," she said sincerely. "Your support means a great deal to both of us." In the months that followed, Matteo and Grace's relationship continued flourishing, grounded firmly in genuine acceptance, patience, and mutual respect. Matteo gradually found himself more confident navigating social situations, no longer defined entirely by his earlier anxiety, though he remained genuinely, authentically himself throughout this gradual, meaningful growth. Grace continued teaching, occasionally sharing stories of her students' small triumphs with the same genuine warmth and patience she had first shown Matteo that evening at the gala. Alessio, meanwhile, found himself gradually softening his usually guarded, protective instincts, learning steadily to trust that his brother's happiness didn't require constant vigilance, but rather genuine support and the freedom to build his own meaningful connections. Their family, once defined largely by careful protection and calculated caution, gradually opened itself toward genuine warmth and connection, Grace's presence bringing a lightness and authenticity that had been missing for years. One peaceful afternoon, nearly a year after that fateful evening at the charity gala, Matteo found himself standing again in the same grand ballroom, this time preparing to propose to Grace during another family event, wanting to honor the place where their genuine connection had first blossomed so unexpectedly. As he knelt before her, genuine nervousness and hope evident clearly in his gentle expression, the surrounding guests, including Alessio, watched with quiet, genuine joy. "Grace," Matteo said softly, sincerity clear in his voice, "you saw me clearly from the very first moment we met, when so many others simply looked past me. You've shown me that being quiet, being thoughtful, being exactly who I am, is more than enough. Will you marry me?" Grace, overwhelmed with genuine happiness, nodded quickly, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered softly, embracing him warmly as the surrounding guests erupted into genuine, joyful applause. Alessio watched the tender scene unfold with profound happiness, genuine pride and emotion evident clearly in his own expression. He found himself reflecting deeply on the remarkable journey that had begun with a single, unexpected dance, one that had ultimately taught him more about genuine love, trust, and the true meaning of protection than he had ever anticipated learning. What had begun as a simple, unexpected act of kindness on a crowded dance floor had transformed completely into something none of them could have anticipated: genuine love, renewed family bonds, and the powerful realization that true happiness often flourishes not through constant protection, but through the courage to trust, to be vulnerable, and to allow those we love the freedom to discover their own genuine joy.